everybody, Joe Cioffi here on this Monday, a couple of minutes after the hour of 6 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time on Monday, April the 2nd. Feels like January 74th, actually, with these snow events rolling around. This is, for some areas, by the way, the 5th, if I'm counting this right, the 5th snowfall of 6 inches or more since March 1st. And that is unprecedented. I don't ever remember that happening. Maybe if you want to go back to 96 in some areas, that might be the only year, March and April of 96, that might be the only year where that comes to mind. But this has been an absolutely incredible stretch of weather that we're in, and I don't know. I wonder if we're done. I don't know that we are. There's just so much going on in the atmosphere. Let me, right off the bat, I just want to address two things. First off, and the most important thing is, Happy Easter to all of you, those of you who were here yesterday, those of you who weren't here yesterday and are here today, those of you who commented on the videos yesterday. Happy Easter. I hope you enjoyed your holiday. And for those of you celebrating Passover, a continued happy Passover as that holiday and stretch of holy days continues till the end of this week. Now, I want to just touch upon very quickly the storm from the storm system this morning. One of the things that really just shocked me is I'm not really grasping why forecasts busted by the way they did. I yesterday went for a general 3 to 6 inch snowfall, and it looks like, from much of the area finished up on the high end of that, and a lot of places finished up actually above the high end of that. I just don't quite understand why, as of last night, the vast majority of forecasts, except for the weather services, which was once again spot on for my area, for New Jersey, for much of New Jersey, not all. There were always going to be busts somewhere, and the southern part of the forecast area busted because it was warmer there and wound up being more rain than anything else. But with respect to northern New Jersey and for Long Island, New York City, the Hudson Valley, Connecticut, I mean, the forecast from the Weather Service was spot on. I don't, a number of other forecasts that I saw afterwards, forecasting barely a coating to an inch or two, or maybe a coating to an inch or three. I don't know. I'm not understanding it because everything was there. Everything was there in front of you yesterday and last night. In fact, even since Saturday, it was pretty well straightforward. One of the takeaways from this, I want everybody here and every young forecaster to pay attention to this, okay? Ever since we got into the latter part of February, and for some people it actually started the day after Christmas, they start talking about stuff like the sun angle and the ground temperatures and all of that nonsense. And here's the thing: you could put up every excuse in the book against accumulating snows, okay? And I'm not saying they're not legitimate excuses; they are. But at the end of the day, the one thing that trumps all of those things, okay, is snow intensity, the rate of snow accumulation. If it is snowing at the rate of an inch or more an hour, moderate snow to heavy snow, if it's coming down at an inch or more an hour, it trumps all of those things, okay? It trumps sun angle, it trumps the warm ground, it trumps the warm urban heat island effect. It even trumps molten lava as far as I'm concerned. So, this constant hitting back with when we look at these forecast situations and hitting back with it can't snow in March, I mean, which is just preposterous. You can't snow in March because of the sun angle. It can't snow in April because of the sun angle and the warm ground. The temperatures are too warm the day before. I mean, look at what's in front of you. And I always tell forecasters this: get your head out of the models after a certain point and start looking out the window. If you looked at how this storm timed out, the bulk of the precip was going to fall before 9 a.m. There's no sun angle issue here, so it was a matter of intensity. And the intensity brought the surface temperatures that were in the 50s to near 60 yesterday down to below freezing this morning. When I woke up at my house, I woke up to heavy snow and a temperature of 30 after being up in the mid-50s yesterday. So, you know, and the ground temperature, by the way, was measured at Stony Brook University yesterday afternoon, was at 50. So I had 5 inches of snow. I had more than half of that accumulated also on the warmer pavements on the roads. And of course, once it stops, it just melts away within an hour, obviously. But, you know, you got to pay attention to this sort of stuff, folks. You can't just sort of make these blanket statements with regards to all these factors that start to play in when we're dealing with late season snowfall. So remember, heavy snow, rates of intensity, if it's snowing at more than an inch or more an hour, it trumps all that stuff, okay? End of rant, and remember it in case we have another snow event coming up in the next couple of days. Now, we are already rolling along with the next weather system, and I just want to show you with respect to the prospects for severe weather over the next day or two. We are going to see a rather extensive severe weather, potential severe weather outbreak on Tuesday across the Ohio Valley, southwestward down into the western and west central Gulf states. The Storm Prediction Center forecasting a moderate risk of severe weather. No, I'm sorry, let me take that back. An enhanced risk of severe weather running from northwestern Mississippi along the Mississippi River, bordering the states of Arkansas, Missouri, and through Tennessee, much of western Kentucky, the southern half of Indiana, southeastern Ohio, and you can see the slight risk extends even further north up into northern Indiana, northwestern Ohio, and then goes all the way back down into East Texas. So looks like there could be a fairly interesting severe weather outbreak on Tuesday ahead of this next storm, and of course the marginal risk extends even further, and we have a general risk of thunderstorms as we move up through the northeast, which will actually be more for late Tuesday night into early Wednesday morning, because this takes us to 8 a.m. Wednesday. We've got some warm frontal issues to take care of first, but that appears to be where we're going with all this. This is where this is all headed. So let me bring up the surface map here. And there we have the analysis from, this is at 1940Z, so shortly before 4 o'clock. You've got stalled front to the south with a couple of waves on it, high pressure building in. And we have a storm that is coming out of the Central Plains. All sorts of winter storm warnings up tonight across the northern plains back through the northern Rockies, which we'll pull up in a second. But this low is going to move east and then northeast toward the eastern lakes. So this sets up that warm sector for tomorrow with the possibility of severe weather. For the northeast, it sets up rain, where on the northern fringe it might start off as a wintry mix or perhaps some freezing rain and sleet before it goes over to rain. And then onshore flow is going to keep things very chilly here through the daytime tomorrow before temperatures start to rise. So more fast changes. We're in a very fast weather pattern with weather systems just kind of rocketing across the country with varying strengths. Here's the watches and warnings and advisories that we have up tonight. We've got winter storm warnings up for much of the state of Montana, into parts of South and North Dakota, then a bit of a break, and then another round of winter storm warnings for southeastern Minnesota, northeastern Iowa, through much of the state of Wisconsin except the south, and northern Michigan, with winter weather advisories surrounding all that. South of the low center, we have high wind warnings and wind advisories throughout the central Rockies and into the plains. And because of the dry weather, we've got red flag warnings down further south into New Mexico and West Texas. Some high wind warnings up through parts of upstate New York, as you know, we've got so much just so much energy going on with low pressure pulling away out of the northeast, and rather tight pressure gradient that's going to relax at some point. Now, here's the radar tonight, and snowfall amounts up in the northern plains where we have the winter storm warnings up will be on the order of 6 inches or more. So we already have a narrow band of snow running across central Wisconsin, back through central Minnesota, through the Dakotas, and on back up into Montana and northern Wyoming. And we've got some showers and a couple of isolated thunderstorms breaking out across parts of East Texas, and that is moving northeastward. Other than that, the radar is pretty quiet around the country, quiet in the west, and now quiet here in the east with this weather system that is moving along. Okay, so where are we going here? We are going to continue with this pattern that's loaded with volatility, so that means that there's going to be trouble along the way for some places, and we will start with the new GFS model and show you what's happening. Actually, before we do that, let me go to the NAM. We'll give the GFS a little more time to load up a bit deeper into the long range. So here's our NAM look for tonight, which is showing snow across Minnesota and Wisconsin. You can see that 989 low in northeastern Colorado, with snows back up into the northern Rockies. That low starts to move eastward. We'll bring you to tomorrow morning. And there you can see some rain breaking out, some heavy downpours through much of Indiana and Ohio into western Pennsylvania. Snow north and west of the low center, which is now reforming in southwestern Missouri, and then that runs up to the northeast towards southern Michigan. Now, here's the situation in the east with high pressure up in eastern Canada. We have this onshore flow, so it's another one of these warm fronts that's setting up to our south, and ahead of it, some overrunning rain and snow to the north, and in fact, up through Vermont, New Hampshire, and into Maine and into northeastern New York State. There'll probably be some snow and ice to deal with. Once that goes out and we can get that warm front to push on through, and I think it will, we're going to have a warm sector set up here. There's a line of thunderstorms that runs down tomorrow evening from western Ohio on south and west into northwestern Louisiana, part of that severe weather threat. That threat's going to shift to the East Coast on Wednesday, but it won't be as extensive. The risk will be marginal, and I would say it would be along and east of the Appalachians up into about maybe central New Jersey. From there southward, there'll be a marginal risk of severe weather. And here's your cold front coming through with a developing line, kind of a broken line of showers. It's not all that impressive. A lot's going to depend on that marine layer and if it gets out of the way. Sometimes you can have these systems like this, and the marine layer is awfully stubborn this time of year because of the cold ocean. It will also get rather windy here on Wednesday ahead of that front, so there might be a pretty decent south to southwest wind before the front goes by. And then after that, we see weather conditions improving. Some action coming into the Pacific Northwest toward Wednesday as low pressure begins to move in from off the west coast, and you can see there's snow up into the northern Rockies on up through southwestern Canada. And I'm going to pay a little attention to this. The NAM, for some reason, the NAM does show a little wave here that forms in the Great Lakes, in the southeastern Great Lakes, and there's actually, it doesn't print it, but there's actually a little low here in southwestern Pennsylvania with an area of snow that suddenly appears Thursday night into Friday morning. I want to see if there's some follow-through in subsequent runs on this, but let me now jump to the GFS here. And the GFS is not exactly the same with that look. Instead of having a wave that's closed off down into northern West Virginia, say, it's got lower pressures up in the Great Lakes. There's another cold front here that the model is picking up on. That will swing eastward, and there could be a wintry mix of precip or even some snow at the start Friday morning in northern New Jersey, the Hudson Valley, back up through southern New York and in through northern Pennsylvania as this little low and cold front go by. And then after this is where it gets muddled, because the models over the last few days were trying to show some kind of low along the East Coast this weekend, and I'm not, then it sort of backed away. I'll explain what's happening here. But let's look at the new 18Z model run. I want to see if it's any different than the prior run. But the GFS, anyway, is picking up on a low Friday night near Nashville. And the cold front has already come through here, so the wind is starting to go around to the north and northeast. And it does seem to want to bring this wave back up again on this run. I would suggest, by the way, that in the case of what just happened this morning, this was something that models had in the long range, then they lost it, and then they brought it back late last week. Even on, it started coming back on Friday. And then it just basically shifted northward rather quickly. And then as soon as it got into the range of the NAM just sort of grabbed hold of it and hammered it. So let's see if this is the part of the reappearing process, that we're going to have some kind of another chance for snow here this weekend. In the meantime, by the way, look at what's going on in the west. We've got a pretty strong storm here. I'll just back it up. But going into Thursday, we start to see weather conditions deteriorate in the west, and a rather strong low moves into northern California here toward the very end of the week and into the weekend. And then you have a very deep low sitting off the coast of Oregon here on Saturday. And that brings in some heavy rains and snows, which eventually kind of translates its way back into the Rockies. And you start to wonder whether this is just going to get so tiresome, one after another. Here's another one on the GFS as we go on toward March 9th, March 10th. But you know what? I'm sorry, April 9th, April 10th. March feels like it's been one continuous month here. So you get the idea that this is a pretty active pattern. Let me jump to the upper air, because this is, we're going to get our clues here as to what's happening with regards to the long range. I'll bring it back. Here's, we've been talking about, remember last week, we were talking about this vortex in Hudson Bay that was going to rotate around and stretch, and you can see how it's doing that with multiple low centers and then a trough that swings around. I'm just looking at this for the first time on the new run, so I want to see what exactly it's grabbing onto here. But there's a trough that swings around. There it is. You can see how it swings around there into the east on Saturday. It's not very sharp, but it is certainly definable as it rotates around that vortex in northeastern Canada. Meanwhile, you've got all this big energy coming into the west. One of the things that I'm noticing over the last few days, one of the errors that the model seems to continually do, or has been doing, is that it keeps trying to pull this vortex out of the east of eastern Canada. If you remember earlier last week, it was trying to fly a ridge up the east coast for next week. Well, that's been proven to be dead wrong. That vortex doesn't seem to want to move out. Instead, it wants to lift up and then sort of rotate around. So you get all this energy that keeps rotating around, and there's, at least for this time of year, there's a fair amount of cold air that we're dealing with. But I'm going to try something here, folks. Give me 1 second. Let me see if I have the ability to do this. This is just going to take me a minute to set up. Here we go. Okay, this might work. All right, so let's get this upper air. Almost there. Just be patient with me. All right. Excellent. Okay, so save as. Sometimes I think about these things when I'm doing them on the fly. I apologize. I try to get as much as I can ready ahead of time, and it doesn't always work for me for time constraints. But let me bring this down And yes, okay, so we can do this. Awesome. Open. Okay, so you should be able to see, as I'm bringing it up to the front of the screen now. There we go. Here, this is the paint box that I use. And yes, let me center this here a bit better. There we go. So here, this is the GFS upper air for Thursday night, and I just want to show you what's happening here in terms of the whole structure of the upper atmosphere. You've got, you know, one of the big things one of the big features that is really creating some huge problems here is the presence of this big upper high that is sitting in the polar region north of easternmost Siberia. You can see it right there. This upper high is, you know, it's a block on the other side, in a sense, and we also have this big ridge that's out in the Atlantic along. This is here we have 60 west, so this is 40 degrees west, running up into Greenland. So what that does is that effectively that locks this complex vortex that you see in eastern Canada. It just locks it in there. So, you know, the natural tendency for this is to want to move out to the east, but it can't. So instead, it just tries to move east, and then it starts rotating around. Then you get these spokes that come around, and here's one that is rotating down southward on the back side. This is something that the models have been showing for days, and the problem in terms of the actual forecast is trying to gauge where this rotation is taking place. How far west is that arm going to be? Is it going to be only, say, from the eastern lakes eastward, so that you just basically get a trough that swings down and around, or is that arm going to rotate so far west that it digs southeastward and creates room for some kind of storm development? This is a very critical question in terms of trying to figure out the long range. I will bring up another map here. Let me just we'll get the close-up view, and I'll bring up the U.S. upper air picture at 18,000 feet. I'm just going to bring it far enough along, at least to see what's going on for the weekend. But here we have it. I'll have Saturdays here. And sometimes I think about these things. You know, I probably should do a better job of planning this ahead of time. But here we go. I'm going to just bring up Saturday's jet stream map of the full U.S. Okay. I just want to make sure you guys can see that better than well enough. Sorry. Let's try this again. Okay, I think this might work a bit better. Yes, all right, good. Now I can shrink this down just a little. And okay, so here's your upper air jet stream for Saturday. And, you know, here your flow is, you've got this kind of strong westerly flow. It's hard to pick out where the energy is. Okay, it's not like you have if you have a deep trough that looks something like this. Okay, this is obviously not what we have. A deep trough like this would definitely, argue for storminess along the East Coast. In this case, however, what we have is something a bit different in that you've got short waves that are sort of embedded in the flow here, and they're not particularly well defined. But you know what? Neither was the system that we had last night and this morning. So if you get just enough of a kink in here in the flow, you could wind up having a weather event, much like what we just went through. The strong northern jet continues to be a dominant feature. You can see this dark blue area there where the base of the upper vortex is. So you've got this source of cold air that continues to come down. So the question becomes a matter of timing in seeing whether, how these systems time out going forward. So we do have a lot to look at. One of the things I do want to bring up, because I did see somebody post about this, so let me just come back to you on a different view here. Let's go to the teleconnections because some people are screaming about the teleconnections for the end of this week. I mean, look, I've been trying to really get a good handle on working with these teleconnections here that we've pointed to from time to time over the last 4 or 5 weeks, and they have helped us to some degree. One of the things we are noticing is that for this coming weekend, we do have a spike in the PNA going positive, which normally is something you want to put a check mark for a storm in the east. You got a positive PNA, you put a check mark in there. The NAO is sort of straddling around neutral, so it's not having an impact one way or the other really. It's not as if it's rising sharply or declining sharply into that neutral zone. It's just sort of playing in that neutral zone all week before it goes positive. The EPO, which has been strongly negative for a while, is spiking up to neutral right at the time that the PNA is going positive. So, there is at least a signal here of some kind for this weekend. Now, whether it plays out or not the way you want it to play out, depending on, whether you want a storm or you don't want a storm, remains to be seen. Frankly, I want this all to go away, okay, because I'm tired of all this. By the way, let me just bring let's bring the GFS back up. And I want to put up one of the conclusions. The snow forecast maps actually worked very well, but I think that this weekend with a number of the models, a lot of the models did pretty well with this system here in the east this week. So I kind of that was sort of a good thing. Of course, nobody paid attention to it, but let me bring up the full U.S. map. So I'll pull up the 10-day snowfall. And by the way, the 10-to-1 snowfall map actually worked pretty well. Okay, so let me back this off. This is the 24-hour snowfall rather than the cumulative. So here's what we have for Tuesday, for the next 24 hours across the northern plains and then across the lakes. So it looks like a 6-inch plus snowfall there. And then as we move into the weekend, and here's for Friday, ahead of that wave that is in the eastern lakes, which the NAM has got further southwest, further southeast, a coating to a couple of inches here. Notice this area of snow that expands down through the central plains and on up into the middle Mississippi Valley. That's with the system for Saturday, for the weekend, if it's real, and right now it's scattering some amounts of several inches or more, and then here comes another one for the early part of next week as that rolls along. You get the idea, folks. We're in a bit of a bowling alley. Those of you watching from Europe, very quickly, just want to take a look at what's happening in your neck of the woods, because there actually is some snow going on in northern England and Scotland, or there was today. That is going to continue up in Scotland at least as low pressure moves into southern England. The rainfall amounts in southern England and Wales excessive here over the next couple of days. And then finally weather conditions improve toward the end of the week before another Atlantic low brings in some rain over the weekend. So busy weather pattern over on the European side, although maybe, I don't know if you guys, I saw reports that some areas in England, Ireland, Wales, and Scotland did get some snow on Easter Sunday and overnight into today, but it looks like that's going to start diminishing and continuing to shift to the north. All right, so I'm on board with you guys here, so give me 1 second to get a little bit more organized. It's good to see everybody here. I don't know if I said this earlier, but I had 5 inches of snow overnight, and that puts my season total at 75.4 compared to an average where I am in central Long Island of about 32. I have been living where I have been living for the last almost 32 years. This is the 3rd snowiest winter for me. The 2nd snowiest is the winter of 2002-2003, where I had 83 inches for the season, and the winter of 95-96, where I had 96 inches for the winter. And by the way, 16 of those inches came in the month of April. There were actually 3 snow events that affected the area that I'm in during that month of April, and there were a few of them also in the month of March. So it leads me to think that this is probably, you have to go back to March, April 96 to find a period that is comparable to this one. And by the way, since March 1st, I have had 40 inches of snow. So just in the last 33 days, I have had more snow in the last 33 days than I would have in an average winter here. Okay, and that's a very imposing statistic, and just goes to show you just what kind of a dynamic pattern that we're in, and the fact that even if back in February when people were screaming about the winter being over, well, how wrong were you? And also, by the way, I got to go back and double check this stat because the New York City Weather Service put this out last week, that after the last big storm, that New York City was within 12 inches of having the snowiest decade on record, taking out the I believe it was the decade of either the 1870s or the 1880s. But this would be the snowiest decade on weather, and there's still one more winter to go to count. So it only needs 6 more inches of snow to put them over the top, and we have whatever we wind up getting, if we get any more this month, plus all of next winter to get those 6 inches. I also feel, by the way, we got to get out of this pattern we're in and move on, because it's getting very tiresome. Cullen, 5 inches in northwest New Jersey, 54 for the season, so I'm beating you. Gloucester Township in New Jersey, Paul Sack, they were calling for 1 to 2 inches here, and you got nothing. Yeah, the southern flank pulled up further north, and that's certainly a danger any time of year, and especially a danger this time of year if you're a snow lover. Stephen Franco, good to see you here on board. Corey Bodziak, good to see you here. Also, threat for severe weather in New Jersey, Central and South Jersey for Wednesday. David Schwartz, NAO block is gone. It's positive now. No wonder storms are moving along. And David Schwartz, as I've said many times, how overstated that NAO can be. Okay, it's one way, very important way to get storms here in the east, but it's not the only way. We saw what the NAO negative did in the month of March. Now we're seeing that we're still able to get snow threats because there are other indices and teleconnections that have highs and lows in the chess pieces are basically in places where they need to be to feed down cold air into the east and to bring storms and move them along with some moisture. And the pattern remains very, very active going forward. Cullen, you're talking about the water park. Yeah, they got to move all the snow around it, I guess. Just checking out everybody's totals here. Timothy Veltman, Albany right now, where you are, 74.9, and you got a half an inch today. So you and I are dead even. We'll see if I can beat you out. And Stephen Franco, the winter does not want to quit. It really doesn't. It's really astounding. One of the things that's happened here also is the fact that we've had now, at least on Long Island anyway, we've had 4 6-inch plus snowfalls since March 1st. And, that's incredible to me. Also, the fact that we've had, for this winter, three storms that have produced at least 10 inches of snow. And there are not that many winters where that happens. And two of those came in the month of March. And the other one was back in January. Do I think a climate shift is going on? Greenfire 919. I guess the way I would answer that is the only way we would know if there's a climate shift going on is, maybe a number of years from now when we look back at this, because, you can't really look at singular events or singular seasons as indicative of something, something large happening on a global scale. You have to, you have to kind of look over this over a period of decades. So I mean, I'm not really, somebody that's more qualified in terms of climate. A climatologist might be able to look at this and say, you know what, something is going on, or he might look at this and say, well, it's part of the normal noise, and we're, somewhere on the extreme. I will say this: I still think we are seeing the ramifications of that big stratospheric warming event that occurred back in mid-February, where we had temperatures up in the polar region of up near the North Pole running 40 to 50 degrees above average. And we saw from that warming event resulted in this big blocking pattern that developed in the atmosphere. And that, of course, resulted in the kind of March that we've had here in the Northeast. And I think we're still working that off, okay? The ramifications of that warm-up, I think, are still playing themselves out in the upper atmosphere, and they may play themselves out for another couple of weeks yet, or maybe even longer. I don't know. 45 and sunny in Willow, Alaska, Brian Stevens. Thanks for rubbing it in. You're warmer than we are here. And, of course, Iron Mine 10, we will be watching severe weather as it develops. As we saw at the beginning of the live stream tonight, we are going to be paying attention to severe weather. By the way, while we still have, one of the things that may happen over the next couple of weeks, if we still have these, cold shots coming down the way they are, and, of course, the southern part of the United States trying to warm up with that sun just strengthening every day, there might be some interesting severe weather outbreaks over the next couple of weeks. So that's something we want to keep in mind. Let's see how tomorrow plays out, because tomorrow might be the beginning of several outbreaks over the coming weeks. We'll see how strong this one is, because there's so much going on in the atmosphere. A very dynamic setup all the way around. And as I said, there's no real sign of the atmosphere taking a deep breath and saying, okay, I've had enough, it's time to go to a much calmer pattern. Okay, yes, Shelly Man Studios, mostly rain for New England tomorrow. All right, folks, we're going to wrap it up here at this point. I hope everybody had a great Easter. As I said, if you're new to the channel, welcome to my YouTube channel. By all means, subscribe to my YouTube channel. It's absolutely free, and you'll get notifications as we do live streams at least once a day. I did 2 today, this one, and 1 this morning while it was snowing. It's a short 3-minute video that's up in the video library. If you haven't looked at it, go ahead and take a peek. And by all means, thank you. I know some of you do share my videos and live streams, and I really, really appreciate that very much. Thank you. It's most helpful as we continue to grow our audience, starting to approach on the 6,000 mark, which is remarkable, and I'm humbled. Thank you for that. And so there are website posts up on meteorologistjoecioffi.com. And tonight at 9:15 on Facebook, on my Facebook page, Meteorologist Joe Cioffi, or on my colleague Joe Rayo's Facebook page, Joe Rayo Weather, we will do the Joe and Joe Show Joe's back from a few days off for the Easter holiday, and we'll recap things and maybe go over a few other things as we look at the weather for the rest of this week. And hopefully, I really, honestly, I want this to be over with. I'm very, very tired. Hopefully, this was the last snow this morning, but something tells me that, you know, we probably won't be. Have a great rest of your Monday, and recover from your food hangover from Easter. We'll talk to you tomorrow.